What's up everyone, I'm the one and only Zage, and today we'll be breaking down the strongest commanders of the Big Mom and Beast Pirates in order to figure out who's the stronger of the two. I've given my thoughts on this matchup in the past, but this will be a more comprehensive full breakdown on this topic. Both Katakuri and King have never lost a fight until they faced Luffy and Zoro, and both have special traits that made them so hard to defeat. But before we delve into it though, if you're new to the channel, you like content like this, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. That'd be much appreciated. King the Wildfire is Kaido's strongest subordinate, which can be easily deduced from the name and scheme of the three calamities. This was also confirmed in his Vibra card, which states that he's second to Kaido in the Beast Pirates, but not only that, he is the leader of the lead performers, which sets him apart from the rest of the crew. King is of the Lunarian race, a people that was once held as gods that lived on top of the Red Line. Lunarians have the ability to manifest fire, and due to King's physiology, he has a special trait which is triggered by the flame on his back. When the flame on his back is active, King becomes extremely durable, and when he turns off the flame, he sacrifices some of that durability for enhanced speed. In other words, when the flame is on, King is in defense mode, and when the flame is off, he's in attack mode. However, he's still really fast and durable in both states, just to different degrees. It goes without saying that King's most notable trait is his durability, which is not only exceptional due to his ancient Zoan fruit, but the physiology of the Lunarian race. Queen says that the Lunarians were known to be capable of surviving in any natural environment. After showcasing the ability to damage Kaido, Zoro was incapable of damaging flame on King. Zoro mentions how he hit King with many slashes, but he didn't bleed not once. Zoro even does the same Dragon Twister on King that worked against Kaido, and it was blocked. Zoro even says on Egghead Island that when the flame is on, Lunarians are almost invincible. It wasn't until Zoro started coating his swords in Conqueror's Haki that he was able to damage King even while in defense mode. King was able to endure a couple of Zoro's Conqueror's coated attacks without his flame being on before ultimately being defeated. This is impressive because Zoro's Conqueror's attacks were more than what King's body could handle, and he was still able to hang on for a little longer, whereas most would have been defeated just by the first attack. The only way to get around King's defenses without Conqueror's coating levels of power is to catch him with an attack when his flame is turned off, as he's less durable in that state, although it's not clear what the minimum amount of power it takes to damage a defenseless King. As for King's attack power, he was able to clash with and even overpower Rooftop Zoro on several occasions, who has the power to damage Kaido, which is a testament to how strong King's armament haki is. Rooftop Zoro's attack power they suppressed on Onigiri was portrayed comparable to Killer's Beheading Claw's attack. Killer's attack scales higher than Act 1 gear for Luffy, as he was able to damage base Kaido and impress him, whereas Luffy in Act 1 couldn't. An important thing to note is that Killer's Beheading Claws isn't an attack that bypasses durability, which shows that Killer's raw power with that attack is better than anything Luffy did to base Kaido in Act 1. Rooftop Zoro was consistently portrayed relative to Luffy throughout the fight. A blatant example of this would be Big Mom taking more caution to Zoro's Dragon Blaze for Kaido than all of the attacks prior, which includes Law's Gamma Knife and Luffy's Kong Rifle. King can also generate air slashes that could send Zoro flying, but Kaido's Demolition Gust was casually deflected by that same Zoro. King also overpowered a fully hardened up Tiger Hunt attack that would be stronger than the suppressed Onigiri that Zoro used on base Kaido. Even with a piercing attack, King was able to destroy several mountains that surrounded Onigashima, and his final magma-like attacks, although weren't effective against Zoro, they were the strongest attacks he used in the fight, so they would scale above everything that I had just mentioned up until now. Lastly, for King's speed, he is fast enough to react to a Conqueror's amped Onigiri even in defense mode. This scales King's reaction speed above base Kaido, as Kaido failed to react to a lesser version of the same attack. King also fights Marco one-on-one off screen after Queen turns his attention to Chopper and eventually Sanji, although at this point Marco was already tired. King being able to land hits on Marco is another testament to King's speed, as Marco is able to react to the admirals, albeit during Marine Marineford, they were suppressed. Now for King's attack speed, with his Flame on, he consistently scales relative to Rooftop Zoro, whereas against Flame off King, Zoro fails to dodge King's Imperial Stake attack, although he was distracted battling against Enma at the same time. Rooftop Zoro was consistently shown being able to react to Big Mom's attacks and blitz-based Kaido, as I've mentioned a couple of times now. That said though, I do think King's Flame off attacks are just a bit too fast for Rooftop Zoro, especially the last two Imperial Dragon attacks that King used at the very end. Moving on to Charlotte Katakuri, he is the strongest of the three Sweet Commanders, who are the strongest generals of the Big Mom Pirates. He is a user of the Mochi Devil Fruit, which is a special paramecia and can use all three types of Haki. His most notable skill is his advanced observation haki that allows him to see moments into the future rather than just read through attacks. Due to the special properties of his Devil Fruit in conjunction with his future sight, Katakuri can evade attacks by morphing his body around attacks to give the illusion that he is intangible like a Logia user. Katakuri is so fast that he could casually evade pre-future sight Gear 4 Luffy's attacks. However, when he loses his calmness, Luffy is able to land hits on him even in base pre-future sight. At his best, Katakuri's speed is relative to Whole Cake Island Snake Man Luffy, which is Luffy's fastest Gear 4th form. This shouldn't need to be said, but Whole Cake Island Snake Man is not as strong or as fast as the Snake Man that fights Kaido. You wouldn't believe how many times I've seen people scale Katakuri's speed based off a stronger and faster version of Snake Man that's using advanced Conqueror's Haki. With that said, in Act 1 of Wano, Luffy, who had just surpassed Katakuri, is speed blitzed by base Kaido's Thunder Bagua. Now although it's not outright stated, it could be interpreted that Luffy in this moment wasn't using future sight due to not being calm because he had just witnessed Kaido seemingly kill his friends. This is definitely a valid interpretation. However, what constitutes calmness is definitely varied after knowing that Kaido can still use future sight while drunk and is in spiraling emotional episodes, and even Luffy in that fight clearly had a serious face while fighting Kaido in Snake Man, yet was still using future sight despite seemingly looking angry. Kaido also never expressed any shock that Luffy could see the future after beating him in Curry, unlike he did with Luffy's attack power, which could mean that Kaido first learned that Luffy could see the future in Act 1 of Wano, or that it wasn't significant enough to mention. In fact, Kaido comments on Luffy having future sight much later into the fight and actually suggests that he had known all along that Luffy was seeing the future, but for exactly how long he knew isn't clear. Kaido's comment after Luffy slightly dodged the Thunder Bagua the second time could imply that this time Luffy was using future sight, but we also know that Luffy trained his physical body doing manual labor while cuffed in Sea Stone. So for the sake of the video, I'll give the speed scaling chain for both interpretations of Kaido blitzing Luffy in Act 1. Interpretation A: if Luffy did use future sight in Act 1, that means Chapter 1000 base Luffy's reaction speed using future sight is better than Gear 4th Bound Man's in Act 1. Gear 2nd gives a several times amp to Luffy's speed, and Gear 4th is even faster than Gear 2nd. Now for Interpretation B: if Luffy didn't use future sight in Act 1, this moment wouldn't be an accurate representation of Luffy's true reaction speed. In fact, given how much of a speed amp Bound Man is from base, it's possible Luffy could have dodged the Thunder Bagua had he used future sight. This muddies the water because Luffy did do physical training in Udon, which would boost all of his stats, but the amp of Gear 4th is obviously more than the amp that his physical training would do to his base to slightly dodge the Thunder Bagua on the rooftop. Using Interpretation A of Act 1 Luffy vs Kaido, Katakuri's reaction speed would scale below Chapter 1000 base Luffy. However, with Interpretation B, Katakuri scales much faster than rooftop base Luffy and would be close to Gear 4th levels of speed, but not as fast because Luffy trained his body since Whole Cake Island, like I've mentioned a few times now. This to me makes much more sense than Interpretation A because it leads to metas like Katakuri being relative to the Flying Six through Luffy's fight with the ulti. That meta just falls flat regardless of how you scale it, because Perospero scales above the Flying Six through his fight against Nekomamushi, and Neko scales above the Flying Six based on Jack's statement comparing the Scabbards to the Flying Six. Katakuri scales far above Perospero error in every stat, so even if you were to go with the power cliff angle, it doesn't even work here. Finally, for Katakuri's attack power, he scales consistently relative to Snake Man Luffy's attack power. Snake Man is Luffy's speed form of Gear 4th, making it the fastest, but is not as powerful as Bound Man, which had more inflated muscles for extra strength. In Act 1 of Wano, Luffy was unable to damage base Kaido using Bound Man, which would also mean that Katakuri can't damage base Kaido either. Luffy would then go on to advance his proficiency in Armament Haki, learning the first level of advanced armament or emission, which increases one's attack power a lot, and Luffy believed by learning this he'd be able to damage Kaido. However, Luffy went a step further and mastered the second level to advanced armament or internal destruction, and not only is this level even more powerful than the first, but it allows the user to bypass the enemy's durability and attack from the inside out. At this point, Luffy's attack power in Gear 4th has become much more powerful than it was back in Whole Cake Island when he first defeated Katakuri. This was demonstrated when Luffy landed the red rock on base Kaido and knocked him to the ground. Kaido was shocked at how much Luffy had changed in such a short amount of time since the last time he beat him in Kuri. It was based on the power that Luffy displayed, not his ability to bypass his durability with Ryo, that made Kaido question how high Luffy's ceiling can go. This portrays that Luffy's red rock is even more powerful than Luffy's Gear 4th from Act 1. Lastly, for Katakuri's durability and endurance, his Armament Haki defenses can withstand Snake Man attacks well, but gets overwhelmed by Whole Cake Island Bound Man attacks. As for Katakuri's endurance, he had his future sight active for many hours, but due to not being hit as much in his life, his body not being able to withstand many Snake Man level attacks for so long does make sense when you think about it. Just for some perspective on what I'm talking about, for the vast majority of this 10-hour plus long fight, Katakuri was the one battering Luffy, and Luffy hadn't landed a single hit until Katakuri lost his calmness and after he learned the future sight himself. However, Luffy was still able to out-endure Katakuri despite all that. There's a breakdown chart of the fight that goes over how many times each of them got hit, and yeah, it's very telling on what Katakuri's endurance really looks like. A cop-out some people tend to say is this idea that Katakuri let Luffy win, which is never implied, and in fact the opposite is when he tells Luffy he doesn't see him as inferior. The whole point is Katakuri did want to beat Luffy fair and square. Luffy even sought out to surpass Katakuri, which was the main narrative that Oda created for the fight. The idea that Katakuri nerfed himself is also silly because a nerf would suggest he disadvantaged himself in the fight, when in reality he was making it a fair fight as he landed a spear attack on Luffy due to Flampe's help. I don't really want to go over and debunk every single cop-out argument for Katakuri in this fight, but yeah, you get the idea. Now, with all that said, how would a fight between Katakuri and King actually go? Well, King without a doubt has a clear advantage when it comes to durability and attack power. Katakuri wouldn't be able to withstand King's attacks when they scale much higher than Whole Cake Island Bound Man Luffy's attacks that were too strong for Katakuri's defenses. Katakuri's attacks aren't strong enough to damage King in defense mode, however he should be able to damage speed mode King, but to what extent isn't clear as King's durability has no real scaling. The best durability feat No Flame King has is tanking the aftershock of Zoro's Tiger Hunt to the face and remaining unscathed, but it could be argued that it only ripped the mask, so a high-end scale would put speed mode King's durability at least relative to base Kaido, and on the low end it's unquantifiable. Katakuri's calling card in this fight would no doubt be his speed, but it's not like King would have any trouble landing any hits on him when he's able to tag Marco and Rooftop Zoro, especially considering he was able to react to a King of Hell Zoro's Onigiri, which is a better version of the same attack that blitzed the base Kaido. The amp from Advanced Conquerors can't be downplayed as well, as it made Luffy go from barely dodging base Kaido's thunder backward in base to completely evading and countering a drunk hybrid Kaido doing the same blitz attack in Gear 2nd. That should give some perspective of how impressive of a speed feat that it is for King, who isn't even using his speed mode to do. So with or without his flame on, King can react to and tag everything that Katakuri throws at him. Honestly, there was literally no win condition I can even think of for Katakuri in this fight, even down to the fact that Katakuri's powers are candy, which can be melted depending on the level of heat, as seen when Perispero's candy melted when Pedro blew himself up. So King even has an advantage with fire-based attacks, and his two strongest attacks are said to be like magma. All in all, King clearly wins this matchup quite comfortably as well, and there's no real argument for Katakuri, especially against the Lugnarian defense, but it is what it is. If Katakuri gets reintroduced in the story and displays better feats, then we can always revisit this conversation, but until then, King is the stronger of the two. Anyways, if you enjoyed or learned something new, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that'd be much appreciated. I've been the one and only Sage, and until next time.